Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Teresa Santos Show. I am here today to give a class basically on the differences between commission agreements and the different compensation agreements that are now available to you with the new updates as of today, which is January 21st, 2025. Now, please remember, I am not an attorney. So if you have any legal questions about these forms, obviously contact an attorney or a title company to help you. But I will be explaining the forms as best as I know as a broker associate with La Rosa Realty and Coach. So I'm just going to explain it to you and hopefully you will understand it. But again, I am not an attorney and this is not legal advice about these forms. All right, so let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I wanted to share the differences between, and these are the new updated forms, guys. Okay, so with that being said, I want to make sure that, let me just open my screen a little bit real quick here. All right, so let's talk about the compensation agreements first. Actually, let's talk about the commission agreement first. So what is the difference between a commission agreement and a compensation agreement? Okay, so we're going to start with the new commission agreement that they just revised a little bit, made a couple changes to it. So I want to make sure you guys understand how to fill out this form first and the differences between the commission agreement and a compensation agreement and when you're going to use which one. So the commission agreement, before we get started, is usually used if you have, let's say, a for sale by owner. Let's say you have a buyer, you go to a for sale by owner, or your client tells you, I want this house, and it is not a listed property on the MLS or anywhere. Basically, it's just a for sale by owner. This is when you use a commission agreement, all right? Because you're not really representing the seller, but you do want to get paid for representing your buyer, okay, and representing him in the sale, even though you don't have an active listing agreement. So it's, you don't have a relationship, but you do want to have a commission agreement in place so that that seller, if he's willing to pay you a commission to bring him that buyer, you have something in place, okay? So commission agreements. So let's go ahead and get started. Seller or landlord, because this could also apply if there's a rental that's not listed on the MLS and you basically want to represent the tenant, and you can go directly to the landlord and ask them to pay you compensation or commission, okay? So it could be a seller or it could be a landlord, okay? So you're gonna put their information there and then agrees that brokerage. Obviously, if you're with La Rosa Realty, you would put La Rosa Realty here. And again, remember to put the correct La Rosa Realty that you're with, because you might be La Rosa Realty Kissimmee or Prestige or, you know, La Rosa Realty, whatever, right? So you want to make sure that you put in the full brokerage name like you normally do on your contracts, okay? So it says may show, right? May show the property and will use diligent effort to either sell or lease seller landlord's property located at, you would put the property there, and to, who are you selling it to? That would be your buyer, okay? So you want to make sure here, and again, this is may show and use diligent effort. So before, if you have a for sale by owner, if you come across a for sale by owner and your client wants to go see that property, you want to make sure that you get this commission agreement signed by the seller before you take your client, okay? So that way it guarantees your compensation. So again, we're going to put the property address and of course who you're representing, what buyers, okay? Now, obviously it's changed here from prospect to consumer, name optional if applicable, okay? So again, this is only if you really have a buyer. Brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. Obviously, this is something new that they just put in all the new contracts. So you'll see that all over the place. In the event the property is sold, option, or contracted to be sold or leased, the consumer or any other prospect procured by broker on dates or within 180 days if left blank thereafter, seller landlord agrees to pay the broker. So again, if you can come to an agreement, the seller doesn't really want to list the property, but you can tell them, hey, if I find a buyer, I can bring you the buyer. This is what we're agreeing to, okay? So here you can put in a date, on a date, or within how many days? 180 days if left blank, so I would just leave it blank. Thereafter, seller, landlord agrees to pay the broker, okay? The compensation amount. So is it a flat dollar amount? Is it a percentage of the gross purchase price of the property? Is it a percentage of the gross lease value or lease executed regarding the property, or other specify? Okay. So again, if it's a lease, you're representing the landlord, or if it's a purchase and you're representing the seller, then that would be what you would put there, what compensation. Seller and landlord will pay broker fee in the event of sale at time of closing the sale, or in the event of lease at any of lease execution. Broker's fee is due if seller landlord defaults on an executed sales contract or lease with the consumer, or if seller landlord agrees with consumer to cancel an executed sales contract or lease. If any litigation arising from this agreement, the prevailing party will be entitled to recover from the non-prevailing party reasonable attorney fees, costs, and expenses. So this is just a protection for you in case the seller decides, or the landlord decide to break the contract, the as-is contract, or the lease agreement with the person that you brought him, he would still basically have to pay compensation. If the property is a commercial real estate as defined in section 475-701 Florida statutes, the following disclosure will apply. The Florida Commercial Real Estate Sales Commission Lien Act provides that when a broker has earned a commission by performing licensed services under a brokerage agreement with you, the broker may claim a lien against your net sales proceeds for the broker's commission. The broker's lien rights under the act cannot be waived before the commission earned. This is a commission agreement that you can also use for commercial property. So this again is protecting you. If the property is a commercial real estate defined in section 475 Florida statutes, the following disclosure will apply. The Florida Commercial Real Estate Leasing Commission Lien Act provides that when a broker has earned commission by performing licensed services under a brokerage agreement with you, the broker may claim a lien against the property. So basically, again, this is just protecting you and your compensation, your commission, and any additional terms that you might come into contact with that landlord or seller. Okay. Seller landlord signs if there's two. And again, here you would put the broker or authorized associate. Okay. Remember that with La Rosa Realty, for right now, we are still signing as the broker. You guys are not signing this. So as of today, we're still signing compensation agreements and commission agreements because we want to make sure that you're filling them out correctly in order for you to get paid. So please do not sign here. Send it to your broker or your team leader so that they can sign on behalf of the broker, or have the broker sign. All compensation agreements or your file will be returned. So want to make sure we avoid that. Okay. So that is the commission agreement. Now let's go to the compensation agreement that is from owner or the listing broker to tenants broker. So this is just a lease or a tenant or a lease type of a rental, basically a lease agreement or lease compensation agreement, right? So this is if you're representing the tenant and or the listing broker for the owner. And this is the compensation agreement that is going to be used. So it's not going to be the other one that is seller to buyer's broker or seller to listing broker to buyer's broker, which we're going to go over in a minute. This is for leases, for rentals. Okay, this is the agreement you're going to use. Again, the parties, this owner listing broker to tenants broker compensation agreement is between who? Is it the owner, right? Is the owner paying the broker's real estate agent, the broker, the listing broker to tenants agent or tenants broker? Who's paying the compensation, right? Is the owner going to pay directly to the tenant's broker, or are they going to pay you, the listing broker, right? Pay the listing broker, and then the listing broker pays the tenant's broker, okay? If you're in South Florida, okay, South Florida, Miami-Dade County, we hear it's always going to be the owner Why is it going to be the owner? Because we're not holding escrow. We're not taking any money from the landlord or the tenants. That is being given to the landlord, and the landlord now distributes to the brokerage, okay? But we are not holding it. So it's always going to be the owner, not the listing broker. In Upper North Florida, obviously those things might change. So if you're in North Florida, you might want to check with your team leader, especially if they're only giving you sort of like a referral fee or something of that nature. But in South Florida, it's always going to be the owner who's going to pay the tenant broker, okay? Because remember that we don't hold escrow. And who is the tenant's broker, okay? So the owner and the tenant's broker, if that's you, or Rosa Realty, or whatever broker you're with, but it's always going to be owner to tenant's broker. Now, if you're with a different brokerage and they do hold escrow, then it might be listing broker to tenant's broker, okay? If your broker holds escrow. But in our case, our brokerage does not hold escrow. So it would be owner, okay? Property address here. You're obviously going to put the property address. I highly recommend also that you put the legal description to that address, okay? And then who is the listing broker, okay? So you have to put the listing broker in here. Term. The compensation agreement takes effect when fully executed copy has been delivered to all parties to this agreement and remain in effect for 30 days. Now, what does this mean? This means that it will default to 30 days. So if your closing takes longer than 30 days, right? Or if that lease takes into effect, or the person moves in, you know, after the 30 days, they might try to get out of paying you because it's expired. So make sure that you put at least 90 days on there, or 45 days, especially if it's something where the tenant is not going to move in right away, okay? Broker compensation. If tenant's broker, okay, tenant's broker represents the interest of the tenant, and that tenant executes a lease of property during the term, owner listing broker will compensate them as stated below at time when tenant executes a lease with owner. So again, this is guaranteeing your compensation. It's saying that the tenant's broker, if the tenant's broker, let's say you're the tenant's broker, represents the interest of the tenant, and that tenant executes a lease of the property during the term, the owner, in our case in South Florida, listing broker agrees to compensate tenant's broker. How much are they agreeing to compensate? So if it's half a month's rent, you put, 50% of 50% of first month's rent. If it's a flat fee, you're just going to put the flat fee there, okay? So whatever it is, you're going to put here. If there's a flat fee or a percentage, plus you maybe charge a broker fee or something like that, you would have to put it there as well. Brokers' commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. Signatures, owners and brokers sign here. Remember, we are signing compensation agreements. Please do not initial here if you're with La Rosa Realty. We are still signing all compensation agreements until we feel that everyone is caught up with these forms and know how to fill them out, because we want to protect your compensation, okay? All right, so you're going to put that, and then owner acknowledges that compensation paid to tenant's broker is for services tenant's brokers has provided to the tenant. Dispute resolution. There's nothing here, so we don't have to worry about initialing anything because we're not doing any arbitration or anything. This agreement will be construed under Florida law. Electronic signatures will be accepted and binding. No prior verbal agreements or representations regarding these terms shall be binding on broker or owner unless included in this agreement. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now here again, if you're in South Florida, who's signing this? The owner, not the listing broker, because we're not doing escrow. Okay, and this should really cover pretty much most of the Florida, because again, we're not a company that holds escrow. So it should always be the owner paying the tenant's agent, okay? But verify that with your team leader and or broker at your particular office, okay? Owners listing brokers, okay? So there's gonna be that, owners listing broker, owner listing broker. And of course, you, the tenant, as the tenant's broker. Okay. So if you're the tenant's broker, again, this is a compensation agreement. Who's signing it? The broker, not the authorized associate. So all these compensation agreements must be initialed and signed by the broker for all of Rosa agents till further notice. Okay. So that is the compensation agreement, owner/listing broker to tenant's broker. Okay. That's if you have a lease. Now let's go to the compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker. Seller to buyer's broker. This is the form that you will use if when you call the listing agent. Okay, so if you're let's say you're the buyer's agent. If you call the listing agent and you ask them who is paying compensation, is it the listing broker or is it the seller who is paying the compensation? They should know that based on their exclusive right of listing agreement, what they put on there. If the seller was going to pay compensation to the buyer's broker, or was it the listing broker paying compensation to the buyer's broker? So those are things that you need to look at and ask the right questions, because if you fill this out wrong, then you might not get paid. Okay, it's really important. So to find that out. So buyer's broker. Who's the buyer's broker? If you're representing the buyer, La Rosa Realty, or whatever your broker is, right? And seller. Who's the seller? Okay, whoever the seller is, you're going to put that in there. And again, this is only if the seller is paying the buyer's brokerage directly from his proceeds at the closing table. Okay. Property address. You're going to put the property address. Again, I always put the legal description in there. And who is the seller's broker? Okay, so you would have to put the seller's broker in here. Now, term. This compensation agreement takes effect when fully executed copy has been delivered to all parties to this agreement and remain in effect for, again, unless it's a cash offer or something that is going to close really quick, I would say to make sure you put at least 90 days in here. Okay, put 90 days in there to protect yourself, because if that closing takes a while, you don't want to have to go back and try to fill out more paperwork and get them to sign more paperwork for your compensation. Okay, so just protect yourself and put 90 days if you can. Okay. All right. In no event shall the term extend past the termination date of seller's broker current listing of the property, including any extensions or effective protection periods, except that upon full execution of a contract for sale and purchase by a buyer of the property procured by the buyer's broker under the purchase agreement, the term will automatically extend through the date of the actual closing of the purchase agreement. So what is this really saying? Okay, so it's term extend past the termination of the seller's broker current listing of the property. So this will extend, right? This term, these 90 days that you put in there, if the seller's listing expires. So you put an offer today on a property and the listing expired tomorrow. Okay, this would still protect you for 90 days after the listing expired. That basically, as long as you have that purchase agreement signed before that listing expired. Okay. Buyer's broker compensation. If buyer's broker is the procuring cause of the sale of the property during the term, seller will compensate buyer's broker as stated below at closing of the property. Again, seller will compensate buyer's broker, not the listing brokerage, but the seller. So you have to make sure which compensation agreement you're using and who is paying compensation based on the listing agreement. Okay. So you're going to fill that out, right? And then seller agrees to compensate buyer's broker. What? Is it a flat fee? Check box. Make sure you check the boxes. I've seen a lot that don't check the boxes. They just fill it in and they don't check a box. Check the box that applies. And then put in there, is it a flat fee? Is it a percentage or other? Specify any other terms, right, that you might have discussed as far as compensation is concerned. Again, seller sign, right, because this is the seller to buyer's broker. So seller has to sign this document, right, that he's agreeing to these terms. And again, for La Rosa agents, you are not initialing here, the broker is until further notice as of today, January 21st, 2025. Okay. And again, dispute resolution. We are not initialing anywhere in here. Those are to stay blank. Please do not initial anything or even give it to your buyers or your seller to initial. Okay, so you're not going to put anything here where the seller can initial, or it will be returned to you and you're going to have to do it again or do a modification. Okay, so please try to avoid that so your file does not get sent back. All right, so brokers' commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. Again, the same little sentence that is everywhere. In no event will buyer's broker compensation exceed the amount of compensation in the written agreement with the buyer. So let's go over that again. Remember, on your exclusive buyer brokerage agreement or your showing agreement, whatever you put in that agreement is the only thing you can charge for compensation. So if you put, let's say, a number 2, then you can only basically have the seller pay you 2. Now, if the seller said he wanted to pay 3, he was willing to pay 3, then you're going to have to go back to your buyer and do a modification on that showing agreement or exclusive buyer brokerage agreement, saying that they are okay with you receiving 3%. Basically, you would have to change that 2 to a 3. Okay. My recommendation, go for the top. You can always negotiate down. I would not put low and then try to negotiate up. Okay. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. Remember, all compensation is negotiable. However, if you put a certain amount on the EBA, which is less than the amount you're receiving from the seller, then you can only collect what's on the EBA unless you do a modification to that EBA, exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. Okay. All right, brokers' commissions are not set by law, and no event will buyer's broker compensation agreement. Okay, we already did that. Exceed the amount of compensation on the written agreement with the buyer. Seller signatures. Okay, if there's 2 sellers, put 2 sellers. If there's 3 sellers, add another signature line somewhere here. Okay. Buyer's broker. Again, if you are the buyer's agent and you represent La Rosa, please make sure that it is the broker signing this, not you, for now. Okay. All right. So there's a couple other provisions there that you can read. Again, seller will sign here. And who's doing this? Buyer's broker will initial here. Okay. Which makes no sense to me, guys, because here it says buyer's broker, not authorized associate, but then here it says broker and authorized associate. So I'm sure that they're probably going to fix this at some point or another to add authorized associate in here. But right now, because it doesn't make sense for the authorized associate to sign here and then the broker has to sign here. Makes no sense. But anyway, you will have the broker sign regardless if you're with La Rosa Realty. Okay, all compensation agreements. And I highly recommend that you send these compensation agreements as soon as you get them. Don't wait until right before closing. Don't wait right before you're going to submit your file. No, send them, because then if your broker is tied up or if your broker is busy and can't sign your compensation agreement and you're closing tomorrow, you're in a little trouble. Okay, so you're not going to get paid on closing. So you have to make sure that these documents are signed as soon as your seller signs it, okay? Or the seller signs it, or the seller sends it to you for signature, okay? All right, now that was the agreement, compensation agreement, seller to buyer's broker. Now let's go look at compensation agreement, seller's broker to buyer's broker. When do you use this form? When on the listing agreement, it stipulates that the seller's broker is going to compensate the buyer's broker, meaning the seller is going to just agree to a compensation to the listing brokerage, and that listing brokerage is going to cooperate with a buyer's broker on whatever compensation that is. If the seller agreed that the listing broker can take care of sharing the compensation, then this is the agreement that's going to be used. Seller's broker, right? Because it's seller's broker to buyer's broker. So this is broker, not agent, agent. Also keep that in mind. Seller's broker, La Rosa Realty or whatever broker it is. Buyer's broker, La Rosa Realty or whatever realty company it is. Okay. So, but it is the broker, not the agent. Keep that in mind. Property. Again, property address. I always like to put the legal description. Buyer's name is optional. You don't have to put the buyer's name on there, but if you want to, you can, just to kind of give yourself a little bit more security. You can put that in there. Okay. And again, this is including any affiliates, successors, or assigns of the buyer. Okay. Term. Again, we're going to go back to at least 90 days because there's very few closings that happen in 30 days. And you want to make sure that you are compensated if that closing takes longer so that you don't have to fill out new forms and see if they can file an extension on that. Okay. So just cover yourself, put 90 days if you can. Buyer's broker compensation. Seller's broker will compensate buyer's broker as stated below at closing of property if buyer identified above in paragraph 3 closes on the property and buyer's broker is the procuring cause of the sale of property during the term. If no buyer is identified in paragraph 3, buyer's broker will be compensated at closing of property if buyer broker is procuring cause of the sale of the property during the term. So, I mean, sometimes this paragraph is a little confusing, but if you notice, it says identified above in paragraph 3. So if they're identified above, up here in number 3, you put the buyer's name. If they're identified above in paragraph 3, then the buyer's broker is the buyer's broker is the procuring cause of the sale of the property during the term. But if no buyer is identified, you're still getting paid anyway. So not sure why they put that in there, but anyway. All right, seller's broker agrees to compensate buyer's broker. Again, I'm not an attorney. Seller's broker agrees to compensate buyer's broker. Check 1. Again, check the box that applies. Is it a flat fee? Is it a percentage of the gross purchase price? Is there a bonus that they're paying? And if there is, that bonus needs to be on your exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. So make sure that you put that in there. Okay. Other, was it a different type of compensation? Was it a, I don't know. I don't know what other would really be, but they put it on there. Other terms. Okay. Seller's broker and buyer's broker. Again, if you're with La Rosa and you're the listing agent, the broker has to sign. If you're buyer's agent, the broker has to sign, because it does say seller's broker and buyer's broker. Okay. Acknowledge receipt of this copy of this page, which is page 1 of 2. Da, 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 da. All right. Let's go back to arbitration. Again, we are not, repeat, we are not initialing anywhere in these two. So you're not going to put a spot for the seller to sign, or the buyer's broker to sign, or authorized associate to sign. Nobody is signing this when it comes to La Rosa Realty. So just don't put an initial there, so that way we don't have to sign it. And again, if you do, it's going to be returned to you. So make sure there's no initials in arbitration. Now, if the buyer's side, if you're the listing agent and the buyer side sends you this compensation agreement and it's already initialed, just don't initial yourself. La Rosa is not initialing. La Rosa is not agreeing to arbitration. So even if the other party initials, as long as you don't initial. Okay. Miscellaneous clauses. Again, this agreement will be construed under Florida law. This agreement represents the entire agreement and understanding between the parties. Okay, I'm not going to read all that. You can read that on your own. Brokers' commissions are not set by law, and no event will the buyer's broker compensation. Again, very important that you understand this. that in no event will the buyer's broker's compensation exceed the amount on your compensation agreement with the buyer, on your exclusive buyer brokerage agreement or your showing agreement. It has to match, or else you're going to have to do some sort of modification to your EBA, okay, to your exclusive buyer brokerage agreement. All right, here again, seller's broker, not authorized associate. Seller's broker, buyer's broker. Again, not sure why they put authorized associate here when they're saying seller's broker and buyer's broker. But again, you know. Okay. So seller's broker, buyer's broker. All compensations need to be signed by La Rosa. I'm going to repeat that many times here because I need you to understand. Okay. But those are the differences between the commission agreements and the 3 other compensation agreements, whether it's a lease, whether it's seller's broker to buyer's broker, or seller to buyer's broker. Okay. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to write your comments below. Make sure that you share, that you like this video, and share it with your colleagues, because there's a lot of people still out there that just don't understand the difference, especially if they're a new agent. So make sure that you guys share it away. Make sure that you like it, that you post your comments or your questions. I'm here to answer all those for you. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I will be updating as these forms come out and new revisions come out. I will be re-recording the videos. As you will notice, there will be a date at the end of the caption or the heading of this video with the date that this was recorded. And the reason I'm doing that is so that when you're looking on my YouTube channel, you can go to the latest date, and that way you have the latest recording on these forms. Okay. Thank you so much. Have an amazing day, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you on my next one.